My name's Tom Jennings, and this is the 24 Frames cast. Now, I wasn't going to do a best of 2025 list, but I was writing an episode for next week, and I'd fallen a little bit behind. Work was quite busy, and I thought, you know what, I'll just do a bonus episode that I can get out there so I can stick to a weekly release format. And I wanted to catch up on a few films before I did this list, and also go back and rewatch some films that I had enjoyed. And I think it's worth pointing out, I didn't actually have a favourite film of 2025. I'm just going to pick 10 that I think I liked more than others. I've made a vow this year to go to the cinema every week, and I am doing right at the moment. I've actually managed to go twice at the moment, so I'm hoping that the 2026 list will be somewhat more thorough than this one, with references to first time watches and Blu-rays and UHDs that have come out. But this is just going to be films that I'm going to be going through. So without any further ado, I'm going to get a move on. And at number 10 was Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later. Now, I have to confess, I was not a huge fan of 28 Days Later. I thought it had a very weak final third, which is to say, I think a lot of Alex Garland written films do have weak final thirds. I can't remember a single thing about the sequel, and it was fair to say that when this was announced and was released, I didn't really have much interest in it at all. I caught up with it a few weeks ago when it came out on Sky, and how wrong I was. I really, really enjoyed 28 Years Later. The biggest compliment I think I can pay it, and I know, having watched a documentary with Alex Garland before, is that he is a huge fan of the graphic novel 2000 AD, which I still read. And this film, in its visual style, and I think some of the humour that was contained therein, reminded me of a 2000 AD graphic novel brought to life. The way in which Boyle uses the camera when there's a kill, and just some of the kind of the balmy stuff that was going on in this film, really reminded me of reading 2008, especially in particular the series Thistlebone. If anyone's familiar with that, the visual style certainly I thought was referencing that. And Boyle throws absolutely everything at the screen with this film. I know there was a big hoo-ha made about it. It was filmed on iPhone 15s with anamorphic lenses to kind of give it the same kind of scuzzy look that 28 Days Later had. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful at times. There's some fantastic drone work. And Boyle just dispenses with any type of realism to a degree. I mean, there's a shot where there are two characters running across to an island, and you kind of see this, it goes into pure fantasy mode with the kind of the northern lights illuminating everything. And I think what I really liked about the film was how it presents a kind of alternate reality where Britain is going back to a Middle Ages type existence. You have a generation coming through who have no concept of what a mobile phone is or what the internet is. There's just these remnants of the old world left around, and people were kind of making their way in this new, obviously very dystopian world. And there's, they're using bow and arrows as weapons. And overall, I thought the acting was really brilliant, especially Alfie Williams as Spike, who's kind of the lead protagonist, and Jodie Comer playing his mother Isla. Both of those I thought really gave really compelling performances, and I was quite moved by a lot of this film. I thought it really, ultimately it's a coming of age tale packaged in this zombie apocalypse, and I didn't want it to end, quite frankly, and I was really quite surprised when suddenly this is how completely shut off from this film I'd become. I thought that when I was seeing adverts in the cinema for 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, I thought it was some sort of like re-release or something. I didn't realise it was a direct sequel, and I have actually watched that sequel last week, and again was thoroughly impressed. It may well find its way onto my favourite list of 2026, but I dare say this is, I think, my favourite Danny Boyle film since Trainspotting, which I consider to be his one and only masterpiece. And also shout out to Ralph Fiennes in this, because his character is in it. His character in this and the sequel, I think, is really quite off the wall and crazy. You can tell he's having an absolute time of his life. And I said to someone the other day, perhaps an Oscar nod may have been deserved for this, because it's certainly the most I've enjoyed him in a film in a long while as well. It looks and sounds absolutely fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. If, like me, you were somewhat put off by going back into this world, don't be, because this was an absolute riot from beginning to end. Next up was a film which I don't know whether or not I really should have put it in my 10 favourite films, but I decided to anyway, because I'm taking the fact that I have been thinking about this film a ton since I saw it. It came and went in the cinema relatively quickly, so I wasn't able to get down and see it, and it eventually kind of cropped up on Mubi in December, and it's Kelly Reichardt's latest film, The Mastermind, which is a 1970s set art heist film. Now, before I kind of get to the meat and bones of the story, I have a slight anecdote here. I was in an art gallery once when someone walked in and tried to make off with one of the paintings, and it was one of the most comedically inept pieces of criminality I think you could possibly dream up. The guy in question had obviously scouted the gallery before. He arrived with a screwdriver and then promptly realised that the screwdriver that was he had brought wasn't going to be able to take the frame off the wall, and was kind of like, at one stage I genuinely thought he was going to look around and ask someone for help, and indeed there was a few people in the gallery. I think most of us believed he was actually part of the gallery, and then there was a security guard just stood there watching him, trying to make up his mind what was going on until he got on the radio. And in the end the painting remained where it was and the guy was bundled. And it was kind of I remember thinking, like, how on earth could you be so inept at doing something that you've put so much effort into doing and having the actual balls to go and do? And The Mastermind is kind of, it feels like it takes place in the world of the person who I saw trying to rob that gallery, because you realise very, very quickly that the title of the film is ironic. And what we have is a character called Josh O'Connor, aka James, or JB as he's known to as his friends and family, who is a failed architect, a failed father, a failed husband, just a complete and utter loser who has to constantly go back and ask his mum for money. And it follows him as he plans an art heist from a gallery with his equally inept friends. And Reichardt strips the heist genre of the masculinity of what we normally associate with it. This isn't Heat or Thief or The Friends of Eddie Coyle or anything like that. This is someone who is absolutely crap at what he does. And what happened in this film was, I think I was waiting for this character to evolve. And the simple fact of the matter is, I'm not sure this even is a character. I feel like Kelly Reichardt has created JB as just this vehicle to insert a kind of irony. Look at this absolute loser. And I cannot make up my mind how I feel about this film. I like the fact that it's kind of like the anti-heist film in a way. And like I said, I didn't look at my phone once. I was completely engrossed in it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards. But I still don't know whether or not it really achieves anything. It's I think on one day or another, I'm going to flip-flop on my opinion of it. And I at the moment, I don't really have much desire to watch it again, which possibly isn't a good sign. But by virtue of the fact I spent so much time thinking about it, I have decided to include it on this list, and it is on Mubi, so please do check it out. But it did actually make me realise something quite interesting about Kelly Reichardt, and I don't normally pay attention to this type of thing in the slightest, but she is quite a unique auteur who is working today, because if you go on something like Rotten Tomatoes and you see the critics' score for her films, they are she normally releases something to universal praise and acclaim, and yet audiences always, if you can guarantee, if one of her films has a approval rating of 90%, it will have an approval rating of 40% on her audiences and on, sorry, the people who have watched it. And I find that quite interesting, because what is it about her that critics love and audiences don't? It makes me think that perhaps she is elevated to a position that perhaps is slightly undeserving. I don't think she's ever made a masterpiece, and certainly I enjoyed something like Meek's Cutoff, but the praise and the adulation that film received, I thought simply wasn't warranted. Also with First Cow, I haven't seen Night Moves yet, but I'll be quite intrigued to. But I really enjoyed Certain Women in 2016. But what's even more interesting to me is her films never make money. There just doesn't seem to be an audiences for them. She's never had anything which you could say is a bona fide hit. Most of her films lose money, and yet she seems completely cut off from any type of financial pressure that another filmmaker would be under. And I find that quite interesting, because it's almost quite refreshing. And I'm glad Kelly Reichardt does get to make films, because even if I'm not entirely sure how I feel about them, as in the case of The Mastermind, I'm still very, very intrigued as to what she does next. So if you do have any opinions on Kelly Reichardt one way or the other, please do let me know. Next up was a film by the German director Jan-Ole Gerster, and that was Islands. And this is a film which I would fully understand if you watched it and told me you thought it was a bunch of crap, but I absolutely really enjoyed this. The film focused on a character called Tom, played by Sam Riley, who is a tennis coach on the Canary Islands, on the island in particular of Fuerteventura. And a quick aside here, more films need to be made on this island, because it is absolutely stunning in a very kind of sparse and bleak way. But this is a kind of almost a whodunit. There are elements of Antonioni's L'Avventura in the storyline when Sam befriends a young family, and the father of this family goes missing, and the local constabulary begin to suspect that Sam and the mother, Anne, by Stacey Martin, may be responsible for his disappearance. I won't say anything else because I don't want to give you any kind of spoilers as to what actually goes on. Suffice to say, I think some people will be very, very disappointed with the ending of this film, because it is, for what it is, actually quite a long film. It's just over 2 hours, but I was completely on it for the ride. I really liked Tom as a character. He was very recognisable. He is a kind of a tennis pro. He may or may not have become something bigger. I don't think the film really suggests that he was, but he probably had bigger ambitions than being a tennis coach on a resort on the middle of the Canary Islands. But the film got just... I was completely happy to go along with it. It's a kind of midlife crisis film wrapped up in a mystery, and it was very strange because I've recommended it now to a few people, and 2 hated it and 2 absolutely loved it. So it does seem to be quite a divisive picture, but it's playing on BFI Player at the moment. Well worth checking out. Now, next up, this is a classic case of more for me, because when I saw the trailer for this, I literally groaned and thought, no way, I am not ever going to go anywhere near that. And it was Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag, and I am kicking myself that I did not watch this at the cinema, because this was easily the most fun I had all year with a film. It's such a heavily stylized film, it is almost ridiculous, and I absolutely loved it. I found it laugh out loud funny, genuinely gripping. Cate Blanchett and Michael Fassbender seem to be having the time of their lives, and what I really enjoyed about it is how the rest of the supporting cast are just a bunch of arseholes who it's perfectly okay to dislike, and you just go with it. It's utterly ridiculous. It's a spy drama, but that really is about the enduring marriage of the Cate Blanchett and Michael Fassbender character, and how they are such a good couple. Everyone in it is incredibly good looking. It wears its influences on its sleeve. It doesn't try and be anything else other than what it is, which is a great, fun, adult made picture. And again, cannot recommend this film enough. And at an hour and a half as well, it just breezed by. It's the best film that Steven Soderbergh has made in ages and is way worth checking out as soon as possible. Okay, next up, a film that I'm genuinely surprised hasn't got more attention and more love, and that was Magnus van Horn's The Girl with the Needle. The biggest compliment I can pay this film is that I simply gave up trying to work out what direction it was going in. Not because it's narratively all over the place, it's because it seems to embody so many different genres over the course of its running time. It's a drama, it's a romantic melodrama, it's also a horror film as well. And what was even more interesting to me was after I had finished watching it, I was genuinely gobsmacked to find that it was based on a true story. And when you actually read the story behind it, I think it takes on even more weight. An incredible performance by Vic Carmen-Sohn as the lead character of Caroline. And I know that the film was nominated for Best Foreign International Feature Film at the Oscars, and I think it has a contemporary relevance as well, especially in the UK with what we have had with the horrific case of the serial killer nurse Lucy Letby. It hasn't had a particularly wide release on home media, and I wouldn't be surprised if this finds its way onto one of the boutique labels, because I'd certainly like to see this in HDR and UHD and what have you. It is actually playing on Mubi and has a 4K version of that, which is what I watched, and it looks absolutely beautiful, so do check it out. So next up was the documentary 2,000 Meters to Zdrivka, and this was a follow-up to excellent documentary 20 Days in Mariupol. And I'm not going to say a whole heap about this documentary, because I'm going to do an episode on those two documentaries, because I do feel that they are, this included, one of some of the most important films made this century, and I really do mean that in more ways than one, and I think I'll get to it a lot more when I do that episode. But this was genuinely a harrowing film. It for all intents and purposes, although it's a documentary, it does play out many of the scenes that you see in it you would have seen in combat films before, only this time playing for real. And in a world when we are so politically divided, the war in Ukraine seems to be a cipher which, through idiots on the right and idiots on the left, extol their most absurd, daft views. People on the left think this is some kind of conflict that is the result of NATO and various other conspiracy theories. People on the right, and especially idiots like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, seem to treat this as some sort of game in which they can say things one minute and do something else the next, and it is just utterly depressing. And what this film shows is that on the ground there is a very real price that incredibly brave, mostly young Ukrainian men are paying a huge price. And I genuinely think this is one of the best combat films ever made, and as I said, I will go into a lot more detail on this at a later date. 2,000 Meters to Zdrivka, a brilliant documentary. Do seek it out wherever you can. Next up was a return to form by directors who's I wouldn't say they've made bad films in the recent years, but they just made a few films that I haven't been particularly interested in, and that was Young Mothers by the Dardenne brothers. Now, this is a film which focuses on 5 young women who have had babies at an incredibly young age and are essentially navigating the new world that they find themselves in. And I know this world, and I'm not going to go into reasons why, but I do have quite a good understanding and have experienced the world that this film takes place in. And why I really loved this film was because in lesser hands, say someone, a far less competent filmmaker, someone like Ken Loach would have insisted in making these girls victims, and they would have been victims of an evil society that's ruled by capitalism, and no one cares about these plight. But the Darden brothers, who've been doing this for years, are able to make a film that is set primarily within, I'm not entirely sure I like the classification, but the world of kind of working class people that make a film that feels incredibly honest and real. And I say that because these are girls who, for various reasons, have got pregnant or have had babies incredibly young and are kind of in and out of the care system. And this film has the sophistication to allow you to find at times their behaviour extremely irritating. Yes, they are young, but also they have made decisions which are poor, and you are allowed to judge them. But crucially, you do sympathise with them, you do empathise with these girls. And as the narrative progresses, you will find yourself having all kinds of emotions about how you feel, what is going on. And it resists the urge to make this a never-ending misery fest. Indeed, I found the ending of this film, it doesn't offer you neatly tied up conclusions, but it does have a kind of realistic hope to it. There is a genuine sense that there could be a better world for these young ladies, for these young mothers out there, other than opposed to this kind of never-ending spiral of despair. And one of the stories that really got me was one of the girls who is thinking of giving up her child for adoption. And I'm not going to go into reasons why, but I do know this world. And some people will say adoption is just someone giving up their responsibility, foisting it onto someone else. And other people, there are people who will say adoption is the ultimate in selfishness, like you simply want to be rid of a burden that you don't want to have to deal with. And I know from personal experience this is not the case, and that storyline in particular, and I won't name which one it is or what actually happens, particularly resonated with me because I think it shows that in certain circumstances it can be the ultimate act of love. And as I said, it's not that I haven't enjoyed the Darden brothers films over the past few films. I just haven't engaged with them in the same way I have things like with The Son and The Kid with the Bike and Rosetta and The Promise. And I felt this was a real reminder of just how great a filmmakers they can be. As yet, as far as I'm aware, it hasn't had any home video release. It's not on any streaming services, so I don't know when this one will be available to watch. But when it does, I will let you know and leave a link in what episode it is, because I do think this is one that is really well worth seeking out. So next up was a Corsican set crime drama called The Kingdom, directed by Julien Colonna, and this was one of the standout cinematic experiences I had this year, because I didn't know anything about this film. I literally just watched it on a whim when I was walking past home one day, went in there, and I was pretty blown away. There's a few things that I kind of need to kind of make out just before I talk about it. Almost everyone in this film hasn't acted before, and it was filmed over a period of, I believe, about 2.5 years, on and off when the money came in. So it's a very low budget crime thriller. And it completely gripped me from beginning to end. The story focuses on a young girl called Lucia, and she is the 15-year-old daughter of a crime kingpin called Pierre Paul, played, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. I don't want to kind of massacre it, but basically she goes to stay with her father, who is in hiding, and all kinds of things go wrong, and it turns into a kind of criminals on the run stroke revenge thriller. It is absolutely gorgeous to watch her, and the central performances are really quite moving. There's a genuine bond between the two main characters, and just how you're watching a man who is the Pierre Paul character, who is this almost like Tony Soprano-esque person, but he's also just such a dedicated, loving father. And what I think the genius of the film is that because of the kind of just the sheer geographical size of Corsica, there's only so many places they can go before the past is going to catch up with them. And there is a sense of formality about what is going to happen. But at the same time, the film never felt predictable or cliched in any way, despite the fact it probably was when I think about it. I'm sure if I put my mind to it, I could come up with a list of films that I feel like this is riffing on, but it somehow feels completely original. It's gorgeous to look at, and I was absolutely gripped by it. And it's one of those rare films. I kind of left the cinema, and the first thing I did was text a few friends telling them that they had to go and see it. And it's now on BFI Player, and my girlfriend actually watched it recently, and she said if she did have a favourite film of 2025, it would be this. So The Kingdom, as I said, it's on BFI Player, and it's another film where I hope it finds its way onto a Criterion or a Masters of Cinema, because I certainly feel it's the type of contemporary film that would deserve a release on one of those labels. Okay, next up, I am going to have to reach for the sick bag when I say this, because this next film is about the healing power of art. And yes, I appreciate what I've just said, and I will explain why, because the next up was Joachim Trier's Sentimental Value. This is a film about a grouchy auteur film director played by Stellan Skarsgård trying to reconnect with his children, in especially his daughter Renate, who is herself a theatre actor, and the great man has just written a screenplay which is kind of semi-autobiographical, and he believes that his daughter will be the best person to play it, only she turns him down. So he decides to enlist a famous American actress played by Ellie Fanning. And this is basically a 2-hour, 20-minute film about a family coming back together. And I was absolutely moved by this, primarily because, having gone through a few family traumas over the past year, there were some scenes which were so on the nose and so recognisable, I could not help be moved by it. I don't even think there's anything wrong with saying that. And again, only films and quote-unquote art can do that to you sometimes. And I'm pleased to report this film has been a huge box office success for a film of its kind. As it stands now, I think it's grossed about $25 million worldwide, and it thoroughly deserves to. It seems like Stellan Skarsgård, I think, is a nailed-on certainty to get the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and I really do hope he does, because his career deserves some kind of recognition, and this is his career best. And hearing him speak, in his native language was actually quite the thing. I can't recall when I've seen him speak in Norwegian before. And it was a nice reminder of just how important films are, because films are important in context of the story, and also the fact that I can go and watch a film that has absolutely no relation to my family at all and identify it with characters and situations that have played quite an important part in my life over the past 12 months. So, Sentimental Value, absolutely brilliant. It still seems to be playing in quite a few cinemas, and I would really recommend, if you can, seeing it on the biggest screen possible. So this next film was one where something has never happened in my entire life watching a film, and it was Jafar Panahi's It Was Just an Accident. And I've never watched a film in which I have, during the last 3 minutes of its running time, realised I was so tense I'd actually bitten through my lip and could taste blood in my mouth. That should give you some idea of to how tense this film's final moments are, but also don't really do justice to how at times funny, slapstick, absurd and ridiculous this film is. The central premise is a man working in a garage helps someone who is broken down and believes that that person might be the person who has tortured them whilst they were in jail for being part of a political rally, and decides to kidnap the person, is thinking about killing him, has doubts it might be the person he thinks it is, so he has to drive around Tehran basically asking his fellow former prisoners if they think it is the person who has tortured them. Now, the fact that he actually manages to find humour in such a situation is remarkable enough. But we often say that a piece of a film is brave, or the director has taken risks. And Jafar Panahi has. You want to see risky filmmaking? This man is putting online. He has literally been to prison in Iran for various nonsensical charges, and still made this film, which is technically criticises the current regime in Tehran, in Iran, and that is bravery. It's not on a scale which I don't think many of us could possibly imagine, and by God, I had a great time with it. It was the cinema I was in was absolutely loving this. People, you could tell everyone was having such a great time, and it's a film that puts you through so many emotions, and to end up being in a place where I was literally, as I said, so tense I bit my lip till it was bleeding, which I would never have even remotely predicted at the start of it, is a testament as to just how well crafted and how intelligent the screenplay is. So that's going to be my top 10 for 2025. Let me know yours, because I'm sure there might be a few on that I've missed out. I will be returning next week. I've got hopefully what I think you will find a really interesting episode about a certain Russian filmmaker. So that's going to be it for this episode of the 24 Frames Cast. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what your films of the year were. You can email me at 24framescast@gmail.com. Many thanks for listening, and I'll be in contact next week. Bye.